Hello there, and you are there, and I am here, and this is episode 3 of Transcribed, looking at the court transcripts from the conviction of Luke Mitchell in 2005 for the murder of his then girlfriend Jodi Jones, in 2003 in Easthouses in Dalkeith, Edinburgh, Scotland. Thanks for coming back for this one. Took us a wee while to get back to these, but so much stuff on. Anyway, regardless, you don't need to hear my problems. This, as I say, is going to be a little bit quicker, coming out with part 2. That should only be a little while. I'm actually recording it. Kind of spoilers and pull back the curtain a bit here. Doing the intro after I've done a lot of recording. So I can kind of put this here before we kind of get into it. I find Corinne Mitchell to be evasive, disingenuine, quite good at answering a question without answering what the question was, or even it's just really hard to get an answer out of her sometimes when the answer is pretty straightforward, pretty standard and pretty simple. So the whole kind of testimony is very up and down, and I do feel that, as I say, evasive is probably the best word, because I don't think she wants to be pinned down with any particulars, which Alan Turnbull makes a good point to kind of showing in terms of the fact that she can't really, she manages to put herself in two different states at two different times. For example, doesn't know a lot about what Luke does in his personal life, but it's quite close to Luke. Doesn't make any sense. However, before I spoil the whole thing, what we'll do is get into this. We'll get through day 1, and in day 2 I'll probably have a wee bit more comment. You know what I'm like though, I can't help but comment when I'm reading stuff. So there'll be a bit of that through this. There is a bit of that through this. And we'll go through day 2, and then I'll do a killing time with anything that I kind of find or compare to after the fact. As I say, we'll do a little bit of editorialising in these videos, but I could make these 3 hours long with all my opinions and thoughts, so we just kind of make it a bit more reactionary. We also have another killing time coming up fairly soon, which is a little bit different. I can't say much about that just now, just keep your eyes out for that. That's going to be eye-opening for a lot of Luke's army, I think. However, let's get on with day 1 of Corinne Mitchell's testimony, questioned by Alan Turnbull QC for the prosecution, and I will see you on the other side. So getting into it and kind of making a start here, the examination chief, the advocate depute, that'll be Alan Turnbull. Miss Mitchell, is your name Corinne Mitchell? Yes. And do you live at, gives the address there, New Battle Abbey Crescent in Dalkeith? Yes. In June of 2003, who else lived there? My son Shane and my son Luke. And who lives there at the moment? Myself. So, obviously by this point, Luke would have been charged and arrested, and Shane has moved out of the family home. Should we understand that your son Luke is present in the court, in this court? And she says, yes, he is. Is he sitting here to my right? Yes, he is. And is it correct that he, for a time at least, went to St David's High School in Dalkeith? Corinne says that's right. He completed 3rd year there, is that so? Yes. And after the summer holidays, he returned for a short period, and then it was decided that he should go somewhere else. And she says, yes. And he went to a different school within the same area, I think. Yes. Can you remind me of the name of the other school? It says it there, but it's redacted. And she goes on to agree. And he remained in there, right there, at Greenhall School until he was arrested in April of 2004. And Corinne says that's right. And since his arrest, he has been in custody in a place called School in Bishop Briggs. Yes. And you've been able to visit him there, I take it. Yes, I am. You'll understand perhaps, Mrs. Mitchell, that when someone is arrested and taken into custody, a record is kept of that. Corinne agrees. And you'll understand that the record includes a description of the individual. Yes. And things like identifying features. Yes. The custody records for your son on the 14th of April suggests that he has a tattoo. Is that right? And he says, yeah. Corinne says, that's right, yes. Where is it? On his arm, the top of his arm. Do you know when he got that? And she says, I can't remember. Okay, is that something you approve of? And she says, yes. Okay, how would you describe your relationship with your son, Luke? She says, very good. Do you feel that you know him well? Yes, I do. And would you say that you have a close relationship with him? I do, yes. And would you have said that the same in early 2003 when he was coming up for 15? Corinne agrees. You would have known, of course, that in the early part of 2003 he had a girlfriend called Jodi Jones, and she says that's right. And you would have met Jodi? Yes. And did you like her? And she says, I did, yes. How would you describe her? She says, fairly quite shy at times and always smiling. You would know, of course, that she was killed on Monday the 30th of June 2003. Yes. And in the course of this inquiry, the inquiry into her killing, you would have been spoken to by the police a good number of times. Corinne agrees. Says, had you tried to help the police in the conduct of that inquiry? And she says, I have helped them with everything. Okay, for example, would you be honest with them, I take it? Yes. Have you ever tried to deliberately mislead them? And she says, no. Ooh, foreshadowing there. Okay, there would be no need to do that, I take it. No, there is not. Okay, you'll understand, of course, that the inquiry that they were conducting was into a matter that couldn't be more serious. She says, yes, I know. And today, in the context of giving evidence, you, of course, have taken an oath to tell the truth. And she says, I have, yes. I take it you'll do that. Yes. Accordingly, if today, Mrs. Mitchell, we ask you questions about matters which have already been discussed between you and the police, will you be able to look back and see that you said the same things to the police as you say to us? And she says, I think so, yes. You can see what they're doing here, essentially. Alan Turnbull is setting up the idea of there are going to be differences in certain things, and at the end of the day, it's a good way to kind of make someone say they're going to be honest when in reality you're going to show them to be untruthful, because that in itself was a lie to begin with. Right off the bat, they were protecting what they perceived to be the truth. However, moving on, sidetracked. Right, can I ask you briefly, please, about a young girl called, and the name is blanked out. And he says, yes, you know who I mean. Yes. Mr. Finlay. Pops up here. My lord, I rise at this point, my learned friend, having pursued the approach he has with the witness thus far, then can I respectfully suggest that now is the time to balance it by giving her the information to which she is entitled, incomprehensible position, before the matter proceeds any further. That would only seem fair. Lord Nimmo Smith says, does this require discussion, Advocate Depute? The Advocate Depute says, no, my lord. Lord Nimmo Smith, is it something that you're in a position to do? The Advocate Depute, yes, I'm quite content to do so, my lord. And by the court, you should listen carefully to this, Mrs. Mitchell. The Advocate Depute, the position is, my lord, as will probably have been obvious, that on the 14th of April last year, Mrs. Mitchell was detained, interviewed and arrested and charged. Those proceedings accordingly have remained outstanding since then. I have taken the position that there will be no further proceedings in relation to those matters that I call Mrs. Mitchell as a witness. Lord Nimmo Smith, yes, thank you. That meets the point, I take it, Mr. Finlay. Mr. Finlay replies with, I'm obliged, my lord, yes. And by the court, well, Mrs. Mitchell, What's been explained is that there is no current live proceedings standing. You understand that? And she says yes. You're subject, of course, to all the normal rules that apply to a witness who has taken an oath. Advocate Depute. Now, the questioning will continue here, but I do want to take a quick second and just say that again, there's a claim by Sandra Lean and Scott Forbes and the kind of campaign pages that support Luke Mitchell that the jury were not made aware of the charges being dropped against Shane or Corinne Mitchell. Now, the first Transcribed, which was way back when, we actually saw that was discussed when the jury was in court with Shane, and there we have another one there where the jury is in court and it is made blatantly obvious that there'll be no further charges for Corinne or Shane. In the last video we discussed it, and I'll put it here as well just in case this is the first one you're watching. In reality, they don't want to charge either of them because they want to use their evidence in court to show the mistruths, the lack of alibi, and you can't do that with outstanding or pending charges. That's pretty standard, and it's quite common in a lot of cases, and I think if anyone really paid attention they'd see that certain people may not be tried at a crime, or so to speak, because their evidence is useful in terms of getting the big bad, if we were to use a comic book term. So yeah, that's perfectly normal, common, and another lie by Miss Lean that and just the Luke Mitchell's army in general, that the court weren't aware of the charges being dropped. It was discussed in court when they were there. So carrying on then, the examination in chief continued by the Advocate Depute. My Lord, Mrs. Mitchell, we reached the stage at discussing blank redacted name, and you'll know that she was a young girl about the same age as Luke. Yes. And that she lived in Kenmore in Perthshire. Yes. So I'll just say now, I will actually, the redacted name, that is Kimberly Thomas, I believe. Thompson. I would have to go back and have a look at that one because I keep on, and actually I messed it up on one of the updates I've done as well. But yeah, I won't redact her name all the time. I'll just refer to her as Kimberly going forward. Just thought I'd leave it to there and explain it a wee bit better so it wasn't lost there. Anyway, was she a girlfriend of Luke's prior to meeting Jodi? And she says she was, yes. And they visited each other, I think, occasionally. The young girl, for example, stayed in your house, I think. Corinne says yes. Was that over a period of Christmas at the end of 2002 to the beginning of 2003? And she says yes. And was she on her own or were her parents with her? She says she was on her own. And where did she sleep? And she says in Luke's room. And where did he sleep? And she says in Luke's room. They would both be 14 at that stage, I take it. Yes. And did you think that was appropriate? I didn't think the relationship involved anything other than friendship. Now, come on, guys. That we're only 8 pages in, and that is like the red flag, the size of a bus. Speaking as a dad, there is no way that I would be comfortable with that. I mean, the tattoo that we've already spoke about, and they'll go into it in more detail as well, that's kind of a bit off as well, but there's a certain amount of line there you can draw under that. But this, and this kind of feigned ignorance of how this works is ridiculous. How do you think she got Shane and Luke? Not by I don't mean it like that before the angry typers start. Oh god. So I see. Did you discuss it with her parents, for example? And she says no. To see what their attitude to it was, and she says no. You knew, of course, at some stage that they had in fact embarked upon a sexual relationship, only after Jodi had died. What a bunch of nonsense. All right. And after the visit to your house at the beginning of 2003, did Luke visit Kimberly again of Kenmore? And she says, no, he was due to go again, but he didn't go. Did he not go on Valentine's time in 2003? Is it Valentine's? Yes. I will go into this in one of my updates because I don't want to put everything here. I'll try and make these a bit more reactionary, and but there are certain things obviously that spring to mind, and I will be doing a little update about the whole relationship claims by Sandra Lean, because the last couple of paragraphs in their own shoot her story to shit, but in quite a big way, really. Her claims that Luke was, faithful, should we say, are completely wrong. I think I'll go, as I say, we'll do an update about it, because like the Shane's testimony, the one that we done last time after the last transcribed, it's just a bit better to put all those thoughts in there. Anyway, sidetrack, moving on, page 9. February, I can't remember. Right, was he supposed to be visiting Kimberly at Kenmore in the course of the summer of 2003? Says yes, he was supposed to be going up there. Was he going to be staying? He was supposed to be staying at Kimberly's, yes. For how long? I wasn't sure, probably a week. Again, as a parent, would you let your 14-year-old boy go and stay with a 14-year-old girl for a week? And when, well, I suppose their parents might not. I suppose the parents might not be anything treated the way that Corinne did. However, and when was that visit to commence? Near the start of the school holidays. Yes, we know, just to take a date or a fixed point, that Jodi was killed on the Monday the 30th of June. Yes. In relation to that, when was it Luke was due to be going to stay with Kimberly? I know it was only a couple of weeks to go. We can look at that in the other ways in the moment, if we have to, but the Saturday afterwards would have been 5th of July. Corinne agrees. Was that the Saturday that he was due to be going? She says, I can't remember now. I think we can kind of take it for granted that it probably was the way. Okay, if you have before you production 156, you'll see that it contains a number of incomprehensible statements taken by police at various stages. The second one is dated 6th of July, and you'll see it has a statement number on the top right hand corner. I think it's SA8. Back to SA8. Brilliant. SAA, so Sierra 8 Alpha. Because I'm apparently a policeman, according to Forbes during my first video. The pages, that was bitchy, eh? The pages are numbered, Mrs. Mitchell. If you can look with me on page 23, please. Do you see in the middle of that page that it records you having told police that Luke had been intending to go back to Kenmore this weekend, 5th of July, to stay with Kimberly? Do you see that? And she says yes. So there you go. Again, with this whole idea of kind of setting you up with a question, letting you want to admit it, because it's not a good thing to admit, but then this reluctancy and then pushing it out, because it shows again that we're hiding things. I mean, this, honestly, I think if a psychologist was to look at this, it would obviously put it in a lot better way than I am, but there's a lot of self-reporting on this and zero self-reflection. It's like you don't hear the words coming out of your mouth. So they go on to say, Alan Turnbull says, does that assist in remembering now when he was due to be going? She says, I knew it was around about the first week of the school holidays time. Yes, alright. Accordingly, what we see is that on the Saturday, 5th of July, that the visit was due to commence. The previous Saturday would have been Saturday the 28th of June. Corinne agrees. Do you remember that Saturday the 28th of June, Luke and Jodi had been in your house in the evening? And she says yes. Had you in fact been out for a dinner with a friend? And she says yes. And amongst other things, Jodi and Luke were taking care of your dog. That's right. When you returned home that night, was Jodi still there or had she left? And she said, Corinne says, no, she'd left. And were you aware of the fact that Luke was on the telephone that night for a number of hours to Kimberley in Kenmore? She says, no, I wasn't aware of that. You weren't aware of that? She says, no. Now, it's for a long time ago. Sometimes people forget things. You, incomprehensible, but probably understand or something to the effect. And she says, I can't remember all that night. That night, incomprehensible. I was out most of the night with Mr. And she says, yes, that name's redacted. But again, going back to the old way of thinking, let's all just like to think that his second name is the C word. So, Mr. Terrible way to name your parents. Corinne agrees, however. And says, and returned home to your house with Mr. That's right. And I think you and he spent a little time chatting together in the living room. Yes. Okay, and in the course of that time, you were not aware that Luke was on the phone. She says, I can't remember him being on the phone. Remember mentioning that to Mr. She says, no, I don't. Or Mr. mentioning anything about it, about who it was he was on the phone to. Corinne says, I can't remember the conversation we had. Well, I'm conscious of the fact that it was a long time ago, but I'll see if I can find a way of jogging your memory. How was Luke supposed to be going to Kenmore the following weekend? And she says, I can't remember what round it was, but it was him taking him up, and my husband, well, my ex-husband, was bringing him home, or vice versa. Alan Turnbull, right. Did Mr. feature in the arrangements at all? And Corinne said, no. Are you sure? Well, not that I can remember. Did you discuss with Mr. whether perhaps he might, just call him Doe, Mr. Doe, whether perhaps he might give Luke a lift up and you could all go together, or Luke would be dropped off in Kenmore? And she says, I don't remember that discussion, no. And sending him a text in the course of the following week to say that the arrangement was off. And she says, I may have done, I don't know, I can't remember. Well, you see, that would tend to suggest, if that's right, that Mr. knew something about the proposal of going to Kenmore, wouldn't it? And she says, we may have discussed it, I can't remember what we discussed that night. And I return to the question I'm interested in, which is whether or not you knew that Luke was on the phone for a number of hours to Kimberley that night. She says, well, I was out most of the night. Yes, but I'm talking about after you came back into the early hours of the morning. For example, into after midnight and past 1 o'clock. She says, I can't remember Luke being on the phone.
You don't know much, do you, guy?
Did you not discuss the fact that he was on the phone to another girlfriend with... I may have done, I don't know, I cannot remember that happening. Of course, by the time of this weekend, by the time of those telephone conversations, Luke had been going out with Jodi for a number of months. Yes. Did Jodi know who Kimberley was? Sorry. Did Jodi know who Kimberley was? I don't know, I don't think she did. Oh, gee, what makes you think that? My God. On the day of Jodi's killing, did you know that she was supposed to be meeting up with Luke? Corinne says yes. She was supposed to be meeting up with him sometime in the evening. Yes. Were you working that day? I was, yes. And what time did you finish work? 5. Alan Turnbull goes on, to ask, did Luke call you at your work by any chance? Corinne says, he called me every day when he came in. Okay, and what was generally the reason for that? To see what I wanted him to cook for dinner. Okay, and how would you normally get home from work? And she says, car. It would take you, it wouldn't take you long, to drive the distance from your business to New Battle Abbey Crescent. And she says 10 minutes. Okay, look with me please at production 76 and 77, if you don't mind. We'll put them on the projector. You can see on the television monitor in front of you, you'll see that it is a view You may recognise it's a shop in Newton Grange called the Morning, Noon and Night Shop. She says yes. And I think I'm right in saying that it's you standing at the counter waiting to be served. Corinne says yes. And you see the time there is 17:09 in the afternoon, Monday the 30th of June, so 9 minutes past 5. And she says yes. And accordingly, that would seem to suggest you stopped off at the shop on your way home. She says yes. The other still is timed, I think about a minute later. Could you look at that? It's 17:10, and I think we see that you have now been served and you're leaving the shop. And she says yes. Accordingly, if you just drive straight home from there, it would only take you a few minutes to complete the journey. Yes, that's right. So you'd be home by 5:15. Yes. Okay. And do you remember arriving home that day? She says yes, I do. What did you do when you arrived home? The first thing I did was put my briefcase and bag in the cloakroom and then shouted hello to see who was going to answer me. Okay. And did anyone answer you? It said Shane shouted down. Yes. Shane shouted down. Aha. Okay, so where was he? And she says he was upstairs in his room, which we know from the internet records in Shane's testimony as well. Alan Turnbull, and is the cloakroom the cupboard at the end of the hall in your house? She says yes. And so having done that, where did you go? Corinne says I went through to the kitchen. Do you have to go through the living room to do that? She says yes. Okay, was anyone in the kitchen? She says look. So by this time, should we say 5:15? Incomprehensible. No, later. Maybe 2 minutes, but round about 20 past. Roundabout. Okay. So at that time, Luke was in the kitchen. Yes. Okay. Wait. What happened then? What then happened? Sorry. Good one. Well read. 3 simple words. Anyway.
I am useless with a capital Y.
He asked for a second opinion on the broccoli because I'd asked him to make broccoli. He wasn't happy with the colour, and asked if it should be that colour, and I said no, it should be green. So it got put in the bucket. What fucking colour was it like? What colour does broccoli? Moo. It was just blue broccoli. That's weird. A second opinion on broccoli. That's for me, and I'll put it here. I think little bits of information that just seem totally and utterly like needless and pointless. That somehow they know intricate details of small parts and then can't remember other things. It's just weird. So if it was right about across the board and they didn't remember any of it, it just seems to remember the bits that they need to remember. Maybe just me. Leave your comments in the chat if you think it's just me. Hashtag it's just you. Right, so there's a bit of chat about domestic matters concerning the evening meal. Yes. Okay, anything else of moment? I just said how long will the dinner be? It's ready now. We discussed it. We discussed instead of broccoli what we wanted for vegetable. He chose beans, so that was it really. Fucking wow. Okay. The beans and then dished out the dinner. So he cooked the beans probably and then dished out the dinner. And did you eat together? Luke ate in the living room, Shane ate in his room, and I, incomprehensible. But I believe we'll carry on. Did you have the same to eat as the boys? No, they had steak pie. Right. Now, who was responsible for dishing it up? And she says, I think Luke and I did it together. Okay, did Shane join you or did someone take it up to him? He came down to get his dinner and went straight back up to his bedroom.
Okay, and did you have your meal and stay in the house for the rest of the evening? Incomprehensible. Okay, but either in the garden or the house. So she must have said she stayed in the house, but spent some time in the garden, which I believe is where she says she had her dinner as well. And didn't go out? She says no. Okay, what about Luke? What did he do? Luke finished his dinner and then said he was off to sit at the end of the road to wait on Jodi. So that's where the boys on the bikes would see him as well, where the 5-0 video with Scott Forbes, this one.
Do you think that's possible?
Only one way to find out.
That where that is, that's where he was spotted, and that's where Corinne's kind of put on him now. So okay, now did he explain why he was going to do that? She says sorry. Did he explain why he was doing that? They arranged to meet. He wasn't sure what time. All he knew was that he was coming down, so he went along and sat on the wall at the end of the street to wait for her. And how had they arranged to meet? And Corinne says text messages. And how do you know all this? Because I asked him what he was doing that night, and he said Jodi sent me a text to let me know what was happening. Okay, so I need to just I need just to be clear about this to make sure I'm understanding it properly. You're telling me now about a conversation you had on that night. And she says, how do you mean? You're telling me about what you said to Luke and he said to you, and you're telling me about being able to remember it happening on that night. And she says, yes, I do. Because she needs to. But anyway, you're not, for example, putting this together by things that have been discussed in the weeks and months afterwards. She says, no. Okay, so what we should understand is that Luke explained to you that he was going out. Did you ask him where he was going? I asked him what he was doing. What was he doing? She says he was meeting Jodi. Right. So he said that he was meeting Jodi. Okay. We don't suppose that you would have that would have been anything unusual in those days. Not at all. Right, okay. What did he say about the arrangement? Corinne says he just said that she was coming down, that's all. And she was coming down. Yeah, that she was coming down, yes. Okay. And you said something about texts had been mentioned. She texted him to say she was coming down. She was coming down apparently. She texted him to say that he was coming down. He told you something about where he was going, did he? He just said he was meeting her, that's all. I don't know where he was going. Meeting her, yes. I thought you said something about the end of the road, or... And she said, yes, yeah, he was going to sit and wait for her at the end of the road. He was going to sit and wait for her at the end of the road, and why was he having to do that? Corinne says, well, at the time, there was so much I didn't know about, so obviously incomprehensible waiting on her. Yes, and was there something about when she was coming? He didn't know when she was coming, he just knew she was coming down. Does anybody else find that odd? You don't make plans like that, do you? You wouldn't say like, go and just chill in the street for a couple of hours, I'll be down when I'm down. Because the other person surely wouldn't do that. Or it doesn't. Well, we'll keep going and we'll get in it. I follow. He didn't know when she was coming. Corinne says no. Why was that? I don't know. I didn't ask. Okay, so we should understand that before he went out, Luke said to you he'd received a text from Jodi, and in that text, she said she was coming down, but he himself was going to go out and wait for her. That he was going to wait for her at the wall at the end of the road, and that he didn't know when it was she was coming down. And she says, Okay, why did he give you all that information? It's something we do. We talk. He was going out and I wanted to know where he was going. But you fucking didn't know where he was going. Because you didn't know when he was meeting Jodi. You didn't know what was going on. That's fucking nonsense. Honestly, this is I have to, spoilers by the way, the more we get into this is an absolute mess, most of this, and I'll be fucked if I understand most of it, to be fair, but sorry, carry on. So, I understand that, it's not unreasonable, but I'm just wondering why he gave you all that information, including the arrangements that were made by text, where it was he was going to be waiting and that Jodi didn't know when she was coming down. He says, look, and I talk a lot, but not really about anything. You see sometimes teenagers, I appreciate that all families are different, but sometimes teenagers will say, I'm going out, Mum. He obviously says more than that. Yes, because I asked him questions. He obviously said more than that. He was just going to meet Jodi. Yes, because he got a text message. Oh my god. Yes, but you see, if it would be normal for him to meet Jodi every night, why was he telling you about the way in which this arrangement had been made? Because at that time, before he got the text message, he was supposed to be coming up to Jodi's, or Jodi was supposed to be coming down to us. What? Do you mean that there had been a tentative arrangement before the texts were exchanged? She says, I don't know. But you just did say that. Well, I'm not sure I understood what you were telling me there. I don't understand, sorry.
Oh my God!
I'll go back to where we were. I'm wondering why he told you more than if he was going to meet her, and went as far as to tell you that he had had arrangement to meet and had been entered into by text. Why did he tell you that? As I said, we talk. I said, are you meeting Jodi? He said, yeah, she texts me and is coming down. It's a normal conversation. Okay, you see, if he met Jodi every night and simply said to you, Mum, I'm off to meet Jodi, would you be content with that? She says, I wouldn't think any different to that, no. But we should understand that on this particular evening, he did give you all the extra information, should we? It wasn't really extra information. Alright, but that's what he gave you anyway, yes. Now, should we understand then, Mrs. Mitchell, that from what you've told me, that you would have understood Luke to have arrived home sometime around 4ish and then to have phoned your work? And she says yes. And accordingly, to have been in the house by that time? Yes. Right. You went back home at 5:15 or about then, and he was in the house? Yes. And he stayed in the house until he left to go and wait at the end of the road for Jodi? Yes. And what time would that be have been? And she says, about 20 to 6. Okay. On that account, Mrs. Mitchell, it would seem that he couldn't have been in Easthouses Road at the end of Ronsdyke Path at about 5 to 5, could he? No, physically impossible. Alright. And the account of this evening that you have often given to the police when they've been asking you about it, she says yes. And you've always said that Luke was at home when you arrived about 5:15, and she says yes, that's right. Now, during the course of the evening, you stayed in, I take it. Luke returned at some point. It was quite early, it was about 9ish. Right, earlier than you might have expected, yes. Did you speak to him when he came in? Yes, I did. And what did he say? I said to him I was surprised he was early And I said, seeing as you're so early, you can take the dog out. And he said, I said, how was your night? And he said, Jodi didn't come up. Right, so when he came in, he explained to you that Jodi hadn't turned up. Okay, did that surprise you? Yes, it did. Did you discuss it with him at all? Yes. What was the nature of that discussion? I said, well, she could have been at a friend's house, she could have gone somewhere else, she might have been grounded. We went through various possibilities. Right. And what did he say about it? Not a lot. Just he was discussing with me, I think, about all the switching pages, possibilities of where she could be. I see. And how would you describe the way that he was reacting to the fact she hadn't turned up? Corinne says, it's hard to describe how he reacted. I think more myth that she hadn't turned up actually at that stage. Not anxious or worried or anything of the sort. Not at that point, no. Okay, of course you would understand probably that this was the very first time in the entire relationship where she hadn't turned up to meet him. I wasn't aware of that. No, I didn't know. Okay, do you, for example, suggest to him, well, maybe he should phone the house and see where she was? I asked if he had phoned. He said he'd phoned earlier and that she'd left. Just finish that, please. Sorry? I thought I wasn't sure you'd finish what you were saying. He says, yes, I had. You asked him if he had phoned. And he said he had phoned earlier. Is that right? Yes. And she'd left. She'd left? Yes. Right. Well, it's strange to think how she might have been grounded then. Well, as I say, that's just a possibility before I knew they had phoned her. Okay, I see. So you'd mentioned this as a possibility and it became clear that it couldn't be right because he said, no, I phoned her earlier and I told you that. Yes. I follow, yes. I wonder if it may be suitable time to break, my lord. So by the court, yes, I think we should break now and have lunch. We'll start again at 2 o'clock, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm sure you understand that you mustn't talk about the case with anybody at all. Incomprehensible there. And then after adjournment for lunch, by the court, Mrs. Mitchell, while I think about it, I don't think we heard your age, or at least I didn't manage to get a note of it. What is your age, please? She's 35. Thank you. Advocate Depute, examination in chief, continued by the Advocate Depute there. Mrs. Mitchell, we'd reached a stage where you were explaining to us that Luke had returned home, I think about 9:30, also in the evening of Monday 30th of June, shortly after 9, I think, she says. So, shortly after 9, sorry, and you were explaining to us that there was then a discussion between the two of you concerning the fact that Jodi hadn't arrived. She says, yes. All right. Did you suggest to him that perhaps he should phone the house to see where she was, sorry? You told me he'd phoned earlier. Yes. And she wasn't there. But I'm talking about when he came home a little after 9. Did you, having learned that she hadn't turned up, did you suggest to him that perhaps he should phone to see what had happened? She says, I can't remember if I suggested that or not. Okay, certainly it would be sort of an ordinary thing to do, wouldn't it? She says, well, we went through the various options about where she could be. Yes. Green continues, I've been a 14-year-old girl. I didn't always meet my boyfriend. Sorry, I didn't catch that. She says, I've been 14. You didn't always meet your boyfriend when you were supposed to. We went through various options. Right. I asked him to take the dog out. He might hear something by then. Yes, but I thought we'd understood that this was the first time that the 14-year-old girl had ever failed to keep an appointment with Luke. She says, there is a first time for everything. Yes, and all the more reason then perhaps to think that it was surprising or unusual. Corinne says, as I say, we went through the various options and I said, well, we'll take the dog out a walk, and by that time we might have heard something. But the options, you see, would include, well, why don't you phone her house and see if she's in? He told me he had already phoned her house. When had he done that? Earlier, when she first didn't come up. Yes, well, that's the very point, you see. That would alert you conceivably to the fact that there was something slightly unusual about this. That not only had she not turned up, but that he had phoned the house to learn that she had not left and yet still hadn't turned up. That she had left and still hadn't turned up. That's what I'm thinking, you see. As I say, we went through the various options. She could have something chance with a friend or another friend's house, anything. Aha. Well, all the more reason perhaps just to phone and see why she hadn't turned up. Incomprehensible. Corinne continues, yeah, and worried her mother even more. I see, so that was a concern at this stage, that maybe one should be worried. Well, if I'm a mother myself, I know what it's like when you think a child is missing. Aha. But you'd want to fucking know, wouldn't you? And she continues, and you do panic, usually unnecessarily. Yeah, no need to panic, however, if she's merely at home, tucked up, or having decided to do something else. Green says, I don't understand, sorry. Well, you see, if you're concerned, if you're worried, maybe there's a reason to be concerned. Well, one way to alleviate your concern is to phone her house and to see if she was in fact there and everything is okay. Yes, but still quite early. It was just not long after 9, so it was still quite early. Okay, so we should understand that wasn't done. No. Okay, not even suggested. Not that I can think of, no. Okay, nor did Luke state, well, maybe I should just phone her and see where she was. I can't remember if he said that or not. Alright, because of course Luke had his own mobile phone at the time, didn't he? Yes. And there was also a landline in the house. Yes. Alright, now you've mentioned something there about asking him to take the dog out. Yes. Could you just help me with understand what you mean by that? So she says, incomprehensible, business for the night, but I imagine that's do the business for the night, take him out, take the dog out. Right, so did he do that? Yes, he did. At what stage? Possibly going on for 10. Oh, no, it was before 10. It must have been about 20 to 10 when he's taken her out. Okay, well, I wonder if we're just getting the order of this right. There came a stage when, as we know, Mrs. Jones sent a text message to Luke. You'll know about that. And Corinne says, that's right. And that was a text message sent to Luke's telephone, but in effect really conveying a message to Jodi. That's right. That's that she was late and that she was grounded. Aha. Now that was sent at 20 to 11, sorry. Right. And I rather think that that's when we heard earlier that Luke took the dog out for a walk. After that, is that incomprehensible, am I correct? No. He got the text message from Jodi while he was out with the dog. Because he came back very shortly after he went out. No. Yes, well, it's a long time ago, of course, and no doubt a lot has happened, but could it be he got a telephone call from Mrs. Jones whilst he was out with the dog? She says they could have got a telephone call, I'm not sure. Yes, you see, because we've been through a process of listening to what Luke explained to the police about this. And as I recollect it, we can look at the detail if necessary, but as I recollect it, he explained that he came home maybe around about 9:30 or so. Went in, went up to his room, watched the Red Dwarf video, received a text message from Mrs. Jones at 20 to 11, perhaps spoke to you about it, then took the dog out for a walk, and whilst out with the dog, received another telephone call. Now, is that the same as your recollection? She says, I can't remember if it's a phone call or a text he got when he was out. It was one of the two. Okay, but you see, the important point for my purposes about the account I've just given to you is that it has Luke in the house until after receipt of the text message. You follow that? Now, is that the way you remember it? As far as I can recall, I thought he got the text message when he was out, and that's why he came back earlier. Okay, you mean when he goes out with his friends? No, with the dog. But that was at 20 to 10. So that's an hour before he got the text message. Alright, well that would it doesn't really matter then. We are probably debating nothing, because the point about it is we can fix the time. It's 20 to 11, so that if he received the text message whilst out with the dog, he'd be out with the dog about 20 to 11. It's either the text message or the phone call he got, because all I know is he came back a lot shorter. Corinne's missing the point though. What Alan Turnbull is pointing out is the text message came at 20 to 11, not 20 to 10, like she states. Carrying on. I follow that, but that would mean then that he wouldn't have gone out without the dog until sometime around receiving the text messages or receiving the phone call, whichever it was. He was quite late going out with the dog. I follow that. Now, she doesn't seem to follow herself. Now, I follow that. Now, come in sometime after 9 o'clock and discuss with you the fact that Jodi hadn't turned up. Didn't he go out again before taking the dog for a walk? She says, no, he went up to his room. I see. I wonder if she'd remember that if you had to just say that a couple of seconds ago. But see, I wonder if you could help me with just the geography a little, please, Mrs. Mitchell. Could you do this by looking at plan production 189? I'm going to ask you to bear with me by looking at it in the monitor. So give it to the operator and he'll put it on the screen. And we can focus in on the area showing New Battle Abbey Crescent. Thank you. The main road, of course, is New Battle Road. Yes. And do we see the entrance of New Battle Road to New Battle Abbey Crescent? Just where you see the digits 4, 6 and the letter M. Yes. And okay, and as we go along there, we can pass an opening on the right where we see the Abbey and the letter C, and your house is just a little past that, isn't it? That's right. Okay, now beyond your house and south to the plan, down where we see New Battle Abbey Crescent, is one word there. It's a bit of a sort of burn or a river or something, isn't there? And she says it's the River Esk. That's right. And there are some what people call Tarzan swings down there. Are there? Yes. Okay. And if we look also at production 139 in the same way, this is plan which shows the layout of some of the streets and some of the houses in New Battle Abbey Crescent. Yes. And we can see that, just as we discussed a moment ago, if you come in the main road from New Battle, you will pass the opening on the right. You come to a number of the house and the next one is yours. That's right. Okay. And if one was wanting to get to the area of those Tarzan swings we're speaking about a minute ago, you'd have to continue further on and go down. Yes. Okay. I wonder if you can help me with something, please, Mrs. Mitchell. Can you help me to understand how Luke can have been seen walking along New Battle Abbey Crescent from the direction of New Battle Abbey, passing the house, coming towards your house sometime a little after 10 o'clock? She says, I don't know. I was aware of that. She says, you mean when I asked you here? When I asked you, is there? Yes. And she says, sorry, I'm fucking up the reading, so don't worry about it. It says, you mean when I asked you that's the first you were aware of it? And she says, yes. Can you help me to understand why that would be? I don't know. It would seem to suggest that he must have gone out again after coming home. He came home, went up to his room, and then the next time he went out with the dog. After the text, yes. And that was 20 to 11, you say. I'm talking about the time he got, about the time just a little after 10 o'clock. He'd be in his room then. Not coming from New Battle Road, no. Are you sure about that? He was in his room, yes. I mean, for example, I suppose it might be possible that he could go out and you not know about it. He says, She says he wasn't in the habit of doing that. Okay, well, this is quite a serious matter, as you'll appreciate, giving evidence. She says yes. Yes, and of course, it was important also that people give evidence carefully. You'll appreciate that. Yes. And honestly, for that matter. Yes. So I wonder if you can find any way of helping me to understand how Luke could have been seen walking along New Battle Abbey Crescent, passing the house on his own, as if in the direction of your own house, something a little after 10 o'clock. She says, I don't know. You'll appreciate that we've heard evidence that that happened. She says, I appreciate that, yes. Now, if that evidence is right, then obviously Luke has gone out again after coming home. Incomprehensible. Does that mean he might have gone out then and you didn't know about it? Corinne says, he would have told me if he was going out again. Doesn't answer the question. Alright, well, there are only really a limited number of options here. If that evidence is right, then it must mean that Luke has gone out again and not told you. Does that follow? Yes. Or alternatively, the evidence is wrong and Luke has been in the house all night. He wasn't in the house all night, no. Well, sorry, for that part of the night. She says yes. Later on in the night, did you learn that Luke was going to the police station? Yes, I did. And you, I think, spoke briefly by phone when you were still in your house to a police officer. She says, I did, yes. And he explained that he was a police officer and that he was going to the police station with Luke. That's right. You, I think, naturally decided that you should go to the police station as well. No, he asked me to come along. Oh, he asked you. I beg your pardon. And did you in fact see the police on the way to the police station? I did, yes. This has been denied by Luke's Army many times, but one of the folks that follow this channel has actually spoke about it a wee bit in terms of details, so kind of knew about this before all this as well. But anyway, and did the car stop? Yes. And did you see that Luke was in the car? A policeman got out and told me who he was. I asked where Luke and the dog were. That should be where probably. Where? He said they were in the car. Right. Now by that time, did you know Jodi was dead? Not at that point. I remember asking the police what happened, what's wrong. I don't know what was said. I just heard the word Jodi and heard the word dead. Right. And I couldn't take it in. But that was the first you'd been told anything about the fact that Jodi was dead? Yes. Okay. Did you know that she'd sometimes use an inhaler? Yes, I do. And on hearing something to the effect that she was dead in those circumstances, did you make some sort of assumption as to what had happened? She says, I'd worried that maybe she'd left her inhaler as she was in the habit of doing, and I thought maybe she had a breathing attack or something like that. Okay, what a fucking reach that is, eh? So that would be your thinking at that stage, yes. Okay, no reason to think anything else happened, no. Right, and that the police officers then drive off to the police station, leaving you to make your way on foot, yes. Before they did you ask the policeman a question? All I can remember is asking where Luke and Mia were. Yes, and no doubt showed you where they were in the car. Yes. But did you ask another question? I asked what was wrong, what had happened. Yes. And did you get any information? Well, I got some. Did you ask any questions about Luke? She says, I can't remember. Did you ask a policeman if Luke had been arrested? I can't remember at that stage. At that time, I realised Jodi was dead and my head was gone, so I don't know what was said. Well, does it mean that you might have asked that? I don't think I did, no. Okay, because you see, if you did ask that, I'd be wondering what was that prompted you to ask that. No, like I said, I didn't think I'd asked that question. Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, if you thought it was inhaler, then why would you? That's a bit a self-report again, eh? At the time as well, not on the stand. But anyway, okay, and perhaps, of course, if your only understanding at that stage was that there had been some sort of accident or some sort of problem with the inhaler, then it might be difficult to understand why you'd be thinking about anybody being arrested. As I say, I don't recall asking them. Okay, the policeman was Mr. Towers, I think, is that right? She says, I can't remember their names. You maybe don't. Now, if he was to give evidence and to say that you asked him if Luke had been arrested, what would you say to that? Well, I don't know, because I cannot recall saying that. Yes, well, let's assume he can. What would you answer? The answer to that be? I don't have an answer. Well, let's assume Mr. Towers will say that Mrs. Mitchell asked me a question about Luke. We've heard that much from him already. We didn't ask come at that stage what the question was, because that would have been hearsay at the time. But let's suppose now that we've discussed it with you, he will say, Mrs. Mitchell asked me a question, and that the question was, has he been arrested? Do you accept she asked him that question? As I said, I cannot recall asking him that question. Well, he can. Do you accept that he is right? I can't accept that he is right, no. Why not? Because I don't remember asking him it. Alright, I didn't have any need to ask that. Well, that's rather why I'm asking you, because everybody's asking. It's difficult to understand what need you would have to ask that if you'd thought Jodi had suffered an accident or relation to an inhaler, isn't it? She says, yes, I know. Because nobody would be getting arrested if Jodi had had an accident or as a consequence of leaving her inhaler, would they? Luke being arrested hadn't entered into my head at all. Well, you should be careful about that, Mrs. Mitchell, because if the policeman says on oath that you did ask that the question, that he categorically remembers it, then that's not the same as your evidence, is it? As I say, I cannot remember that question being asked, and I don't know why I would have asked the question. No. Well, let's move on to something else then, please. In June of last year, you had, I don't know if it's the correct description or not, but something in the nature of a log burner in your back garden. And she says, yes. Right. Was it burning on the evening of the 30th of June? No. Okay, are you clear about that? I had no reason to put the log burner on, and it's only something we do as a family. I'm just going to put this here. Pay attention to this. This part is all over the place. Okay, and I think I've told you I think you've told the police a number of times when you were asked the question that the burner had not been on that night. That's right. You told them, for example, that the burner hadn't been on for about a week. Possibly. Right. Can you help us to understand, Mrs. Mitchell, why other people say that you did have a fire in your burner that night? Our gardens are all very small and they back onto each other, so it's very difficult to tell what's coming from where because they're so close. Yes, well, let's assume that people are aware of the fact that you sometimes have a burner. Neighbours, for example, would know of that, wouldn't they? Yes, they would know of that. And yes, let's assume that neighbours are careful enough in giving evidence to be confident that the burner which was lit that night was the burner in your back garden. No, I didn't light the burner that night. So anyone who says that you had a fire in the burner that night just must be wrong. Yes. You see, for example, if it was to be said that the burner was on quite early, sometime between 6:30 and 7 o'clock, what would you say to that? I was gardening at that point. Here we go. So it wasn't? No. Okay, and what about if it was suggested to you that later on still, maybe about 10 o'clock or so, it was sitting out, I was sitting out in the patio and Luke was up in his room, Shane was up in his room, so I certainly wouldn't have had it on by myself. Okay, now people make mistakes, I recognise that, but if people say that they saw smoke, for example, and saw that it was coming from your back garden, what would you say to that? I don't know, because I've never had a fire unless I've burnt a plant. I come back and forth here, and you have to do that in the company of Luke and Shane as well. Doubtful. I think we're talking about something a bit more than that. But if a neighbour saw smoke coming from your back garden and smelled smoke, does that person just have to be wrong? Says, well, I did not have a fire that night. I did not have it on that night.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Okay, unless I burnt some of the without thinking about it. So anyone that says your log burner was on is wrong. Yes, unless you've burnt something without thinking about it. Again. Okay, would that be, so even if there were people seen from different vantage points, she says, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you see, for example, let's put the plan back up on the screen. Production 139, the housing plan. You'll see your garden is to the back of the house, and its borders onto the garden, number 210, I think, doesn't it? She says yes. And the side border, the sort of, to number 204, yes. So if the neighbours to the side and the back were to think that you had your burner on that night, then there would be individuals who would be observing that from different angles. Yes, but it was very hard to see into the garden. Yes, and why is that? Because number 204, they've got very high conifers going all the way up between us. Yes, and I've got a high fence. It's about 7 foot with plastic plants above. Above that. I see, but of course, smoke goes up, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Baffling, eh? And it's like some kind of magic. And it'll go up and over the height of your fence to the back. Yes. And if someone on the other side of that is to see smoke coming from the other side of the fence, then they would know it was coming from. They'd know where it was coming from, wouldn't they? It would depend on which way the wind was blowing. No, it fucking wouldn't. No, it fucking wouldn't. What? If someone is on the other side of your fence and they see smoke coming up from your garden over the top of the fence, then it's pretty clear that this is where it's coming from, don't you think? Well, as I say, I could have burnt but I certainly didn't have the log burner. So what you used to burn it then? What? And why did it cause that much smoke? That it could be confused with a log burner. Nonsensical. All these are cheap outs. Terrible cheap outs. Okay, can I ask you about something else then? Do you know a shop in Edinburgh called Flip? Yes. It's a clothing shop for teenagers, isn't it? Yes. I actually have spoke to the staff members in Flip, covering the search for the receipt. I believe it took a couple of days to actually get through all the records to find it. But yeah, I spoke to a couple of the members of staff from Flip. Interesting. So anyway, okay, would you look with me at a document for production number 102? Again, let's look at it on the monitor, please. You'll see that it's a till rope from the shop Flip. It's a purchase from the 8th of July in the afternoon of 2003. Says aha. And for a variety of things, including a hoodie, which I think is some sort of top, some band patches, and a German style parka. Yes. And would it be correct to understand that you bought some items of clothing from the shop on the 8th of July? Yes. Okay. And did that include a parka? Yes, it did. Okay. Why did Luke need a parka? They were in fashion. We've heard the suggestion that a parka might be a funny kind of garment to be wearing in the summertime. It was in fashion. It was fashionable, alright. But why did Luke need one? You don't really need fashion, do you? You want fashion. You want the same as the other people. Okay. Did he not already have one though? And she says, no, he didn't. Are you sure about that? I'm positive about that. Did he not wear a parka or parka style jacket before Jodi's death? No, he wore a short bomber jacket before Jodi's death. Well, that's something that there can be no doubt about, I take it, in your mind. And Corinne says, absolutely no doubt. It was about the green bomber jacket was about the first jacket Luke actually kept wearing. We always had arguments about jackets. And it's quite clear that before Jodi's death, in your mind anyway, he didn't have a parka style jacket. He did not have a parka style jacket, no. Well, I need to ask you then. I think if you can help me understand why other people say that he did wear a parka style jacket before Jodi's death. I've heard this, she says, I've heard this a lot and I don't know how they've said that. Okay, the only one thing I can think of, because Luke was in the press constantly wearing the parka jacket, people began to associate him with the parka jacket, and Alan Turnbull says, I see and do so mistakenly, and she says yes, which I think's a rather cunning plan, and I'd compare it along with it. Boris Johnson wrote a big lie on the side of a bus about 350 million getting given to the NHS after Brexit. But if you were to Google Boris Johnson and bus, the first thing you'll find is an interview where he waffles on about paint and wine crates, and that was intentional. And I think that having Luke be seen in the parka going about, I think that's intentional as well, to be honest. But you see, we've actually heard from a range of people who would appear to have made the same mistake then. I wonder if you could help me with that. She says, I never understood that.
For example, you see, we've next page, heard from people people who were friends. We've heard from a boy called blanked out there. Do you know him? Corinne says I don't know. I don't know. He lived in Livingston. He told us that he used to see Luke at the weekends when he used to visit his father. And Luke did visit his father in Livingston, I think. Corinne says yes, he did. Well, a young boy, a friend of Luke's, said that he did see him wearing a parka before Jodi's death. Well, he's incomprehensible. Had a parka in my house before before Jodi's death, because that's her mum's name as well. Anyway, that was a first parka that I'd bought him. Take it she's saying, well, he didn't, or he didn't have a parka in the house before then. That incomprehensible mucks up that sentence there. She says, okay, and there was a young girl called, you'll know who is, and she says, no, I don't. There's not a lot of friends. No, you don't, right. She is a young girl who I think knew both Jodi and Luke, and she also states that she had seen him wearing a parka before Jodi's death. Does that surprise you too then? And she says, yes, it does surprise me, yes. Okay, but you see also we've heard from different sorts of a spectrum of associates. We've heard from people who were nothing really more than acquaintances. We've heard from a boy, for instance, called, you probably don't know him. She says, who, sorry? Repeats the name and she says, no, I don't. You see, he told us that although he knew Luke just to nod to, he wasn't a friend of Luke's, and that he had come across Luke one day, probably about the beginning of June, up in the area of Roansdyke Path, and that Luke was on his push bike. And Luke certainly had a push bike, didn't he? We'll get back to that at some point. He says, yes, but until such time it became unusable. Yeah, I don't think there is any dispute that this meeting took place, because Luke told the police about it, and they met near the area where there is a big gap in the wall at the Roansdyke Path. You probably know where I mean, don't you? Yes. Yep. A gap in the wall. Luke didn't know the area, remember? And he said that day Luke was wearing a parka. Now, is that wrong? Do you think then? And she says, incomprehensible. Luke did not own a parka at that stage. Okay, and there was also another young boy called, do you know him? I've heard of him, yes. He said that one day, not having seen Luke for a long time, he saw him in a shop called Cost Cutters, and that this was before the death of Jodi, and that Luke was wearing a parka. Is that wrong as well, do you think? I find it odd because he didn't own one. And you've never seen him wearing one not until I bought him that one. Okay, so these would be sightings of Luke with a parka that you've never seen. Is that right? She said Luke did not have a parka until I bought him that one. He always wore a short green bomber jacket. Okay, but you know, when we examine things in court, we do so because sometimes not everyone tells us the truth. You understand that, I take it? She says, I understand that. And in order to try and examine whether witnesses are telling the truth or not, then it can be sometimes be helpful to measure what they're saying along with what other people say. You understand that? Yes. Okay. You see, for example, we have also heard from a neighbour of yours, Mr. blanked out name, and he lives over the back, I think, doesn't he? Yes. And he spoke about one day when he saw Luke, rather assuming that he had lost his keys or something, climbing over the garage. And she says, right. And he described what Luke was wearing. And it was a parka style jacket. Is that wrong as well, do you think? Corinne goes on to say, well, when did he see him? Before the murder. Well, he wouldn't have been wearing a long style parka jacket. Okay, so he must have been wrong. Yes. Okay, but we've also, as it happens, heard from some teachers from Luke's school. We've heard from Mr. blanked out name, who was a math teacher. Do you know him? She says no. You don't know Mr. told us that he taught Luke between January and June of 2003, and that he never saw Luke again after the time of the murder. You understand? She says right. And he told us of seeing Luke wearing some kind of long green jacket. Well, I don't know where this long green jacket comes from, because I wasn't aware he had one. Oh, this isn't working out well. And we also heard from another teacher, Mr. who was the chemistry teacher. Do you know him? No, I don't. Well, again, you see, he only taught Luke for a limited time. He taught Luke for 6 weeks at the beginning of 2003 and 6 weeks at the end of that term, just at the summer. He told us that he had seen Luke wearing a parka-style jacket with a big hood that came up, and he had a vision of remembering seeing Luke with the big hood up, because it reminded him of a monk or something. There was lots of people wearing parkas at that time. He could have been seen someone else. Jesus, fuck. Okay, so a mistake probably. Okay, but you see, Mrs. Mitchell, that this is a range of people who have known Luke in different ways. Yes, okay, but actually it doesn't stop there, because Luke used to go to the Army Cadets, didn't he? Yes, and he went to the Army Cadets in 2002 in the early part of 2003. Yes, stopped going there at more or less the time he started going out with Jodi. That's right. Okay. And for a time, he liked it at the Cadets, didn't he? He did, yes. I don't know if you ever met him, but the platform commander was a man called Mr. blanked out name. Incomprehensible. Okay, you don't know who I mean, do you? No, you know who I mean. Sorry, I'll go back and read that sentence again. My brain has gone numb. Okay, you'd know who I mean, would you? Yes. And you understand that to hold the position that Mr. held, you'd have to be a man, with a pretty genuine interest in youngsters, wouldn't you? Oh.
Phrasing?
I'd imagine so, yes. Giving up a lot of his free time, for example, yes. Goes on training courses in order to enable him to do that, and that's a pretty decent sort of thing to do, isn't it? It is, yes. You see, Mr. told us that when it comes to attending with his uniform, Luke became a bit erratic, and for example, he often turned up wearing civilian clothing rather than his uniform. Now, would Mr. be right in saying that, do you think? And Corinne says sometimes he'd wear a civilian, sometimes he wore his uniform. Is that not a great sign of the fact that you just don't listen to authority? Even a thing that you want to attend in the Cadets, and you can't be bothered sticking to the rules because you think you're better than them. The arrogance here is right the way through it, and no one even points it out. And his mum can't even see it, because to be honest, I think she's probably the one that caused it. Nature, nurture, eh? That's a different debate for a different time. So, right, and Mr. gave as examples of the kind of things that Luke started to turn up wearing. For example, he said that he started to turn up wearing baggy trousers. Would that sound like the sort of thing Luke wore? Luke did wear baggy trousers, yes. Okay, but he wore his uniform more often than not because he loved his uniform. He should have wore it all the time if he was going to Cadets like everybody else. Anyway, and another example of the kind of thing that Luke sometimes turned up wearing, according to Mr., was heavy trainers, as he called them. Would that sound like the sort of thing Luke would wear? It sounds like his snowboard boots. Yes. Okay. And he also said what Luke would turn up wearing t-shirts. Luke wear t-shirts. Most boys wear t-shirts, yes. Well, I would do. Okay. And then he said that a parka. Just as one of these items he listed, a parka that had a hood and it was old and faded looking. Did look, and she says, I don't know anything about a parka previous to the one I bought. Well, do you think Mr. is just wrong about that then? Well, Luke had borrowed it, I don't know. Oh my god. Well, do you know of Luke borrowing items like that? She says, well, sometimes the kids do borrow from each other, but I've never seen Luke in a parka prior to the one I bought him in Flip. But you see, there's a range of people, isn't there? Some friends, some acquaintances, a neighbour, some teachers, a platoon commander, all saying the same sort of thing. You see that? I do see that, yes. Do you think they're all just wrong? I'm not saying they're all wrong, I'm just saying I was never aware of Luke had a parka. He certainly didn't have one in my house, or was seen with one in my house. Right, I wonder then if we've reached the stage, Mrs. Mitchell, where are the 3 things that you have difficulty in helping us with? And see if I've got this right. If Luke was seen out of the house round about 10 o'clock walking back from the area of New Battle Road, you don't understand that. She says, no, I don't understand that. Okay, if other people say that your log burner was on that night, you don't understand that either. And she says, no, apart from burning, no, I don't understand that. Okay. And if a range of people say that they've seen Luke in a different circumstances wearing a parka prior to Jodi's death, you wouldn't understand that either. And she says, no, I don't understand that. Okay, I wonder then if you can just move on to another subject and see if you can help me with this. There is a document lodged in this case called Defence Production 26, and it's a report of an interview that's between Luke and a lady called Dr. Campbell, who is a psychiatrist, and report was prepared for Beaumont and Co., who are Luke's solicitors. Right. Can I just stop here and just say, this was denied by Sandra Lean, that there was any kind of psychological or psychiatric reports done. Scott Forbes denied it as well. It's fucking right here. And I'll just go back and say, can we just say this right now? All these people saying that a parka exists, and Corinne just can't understand how they say it exists. I'll tell you why. Because it fucking exists. Really. But, what a terrible liar. I don't know if you can tell me in the comments if you agree with me, but I honestly think this is probably the worst liar that I've read transcripts for. And I've read a lot of American cases, a lot of crazy things as well. And, even in terms of, like, Darrell Brooks, and his denial that he had anything to do with it. This is up there, like. So it's dated October of last year, going back on the report from Dr. Campbell here. Did you know that Luke had a meeting with Dr. Campbell, the psychiatrist? She says, I remember him meeting with the psychiatrist, yes. Right, I wonder if you can help me with something. This report details what Luke said to Dr. Campbell, and it covers various aspects of his background. You follow that, and it talks about school. For instance, it talks about, blanked out name, primary school. That's right. And where Luke went, I think before St David's, is it? She says yes. And on page 4 of this report, in the 3rd paragraph, it says that Luke indicated he had problems with a particular member of staff, namely the deputy head teacher. This is the 3rd paragraph on page 4, Miss Mitchell. I've got it. You see that? Luke indicated he had particular problems with one member of staff, namely the deputy head teacher. She says yes. Okay. It goes on, 3 sentences later, to say, by primary 7, now by primary 7, what age would you be? 12 or something. 11. Corinne says. Sorry, 11. 11 or so. Alright. By primary 7, he indicated that he indicated that he was at loggerheads with a deputy head and refused to accept anything she said and What? and refused to take anything she said is in quotation marks. You see that? Yes. He's fucking primary 7. Who's at loggerheads with their teacher at primary 7? Anyway, does that sound to you as sort of curious way for a boy to be describing the relationship he'd had with a deputy head teacher when he was aged 11? Yeah, it is. Absolutely is. But she says not really, no. Well, at loggerheads, an 11-year-old, I had a problem with the teacher as well. So did your attitude rub off on your son then, Corinne? Is that what you're telling us? Seems you've got a bit of an attitude, but your avoidance of questions is terrible. Well, maybe you did, but I'm asking you about Luke describing himself. Is that the sort of way Luke would think of himself? At aged 11, he was at loggerheads with a deputy head teacher, and she says yes. I see. Alright, now Jodi's funeral was held on the 3rd of September 2003. Am I right in understanding that? Her mother had asked you and Luke not to attend. She says yes. Look at me please with 2 documents, productions 104 and 105. In order for us to see them, we'll need to put them on the monitor. You'll be able to see them on the screen. Now this is production 104, the letter dated 31st of August 2003, and that's from you, I think. And she says yes. And it's to Mrs. Jones. She says that's right. And this is your handwriting, I take it. She says yes. And it says, although we're deeply hurt at your request for us to stay away from Jodi's funeral, we will respect your wishes as you understand. Or should I just read the next bit? By the court, we too, examination chief continued by Lord Advocate Depute, we too wish to say goodbye, so we wrote her a poem, as she herself loved poetry. Corinne says yes. As we can't be there, could you please have the poem read out, so at least Luke can express his feelings? That's right. The absolute sheer arrogance of someone to ask such a question and a request when they have been asked to stay away from the funeral and they know why at this point. This is arrogance and just plain evil as far as I'm concerned. The fact that they thought they could do that is insane. Regardless, I mean, even if you were innocent of the thing you'd been accused of, you would surely have the tact and the sensibilities to understand that this request is disgusting. Wow. Anyway, carrying on. And it's, thank you, Corinne, and it's a poem was enclosed with that, I think, and she, wasn't it? She says yes. Can we just see the poem document? It's headed Goodbye Jodi, and there in it reads, is this also your handwriting? And she says it is, yes. Who wrote the poem? She says sorry, who wrote the poem? Luke and I wrote it together. You wrote it together. That you get, did you get any response from that or to that letter? And she says no. Fucking wonder why, eh? Jesus. And did you think that the poem was going to be read at the funeral? And she says I wasn't sure. I could have told you no way at the time, but your arrogance seems to outweigh your sensible thought, if you have any to begin with. Okay, but on the day of that funeral, you and Luke gave an interview to a journalist from Sky TV, I think, didn't you? Yes. And the interview was broadcast that day. Yes. And in the interview, Luke read out the poem, I think. Now, that's the poem that you had sent to Mrs. Jones. Yes. Asking if it could be read at the funeral. Yes. Okay, in your letter that we've just looked at, you said you would respect Mrs. Jones' wishes. Remember, we just looked at that. Yes. Did it seem in keeping with that to give the interview on the day of the funeral? We didn't realise the interview was going to happen. What? What do you mean? Well, Sky phoned and asked what we were doing. They found out we weren't allowed to go to the funeral, They phoned to find out if we were doing anything ourselves, and we'd said yes. And then they said, can we come and see you? And I say yes. And before I knew that was happening, the person was asking me questions. Fucking, if someone asks you for permission to go to your house and then you say yes, how is that a surprise and you don't know what's happening when they turn up? What? That doesn't even make sense. Now, you've invited them to your house then. I said they could come in, yes. They don't turn up and demand entry. No, I said they could come. I don't think that's what Sandra Lean says, or Scott Forbes perhaps. I'll have to go back maybe on a killing time and look at that one. Yes, and thereby invitation, isn't that? They asked if they could come and I said yes. Well, did that seem in keeping with the notion that you would respect the Joneses' wishes? They asked us not to go to the funeral and we didn't go to the funeral. Yes, and instead, on that very day, you gave an interview to journalists that was broadcast on the television. We didn't know it was going to be broadcast. Fuck yeah, they were going to do it, put it in a tin and leave it in a storage cupboard for years. What a ridiculous thing. Of course they were going to eat it. It'd be silly. No one's that stupid. What you thought they would keep it to themselves, sorry, I'm just getting way ahead of myself here. You would have to have been in the situation we were in to understand what happened. No, you wouldn't. I see. Well, in course of the interview, what happened, of course, is that Luke discussed what happened to Jodi, didn't he? Yes. And made various complaints about the nature of the police inquiry. Yes. Yes, and all of this happening on the very day of Jodi's funeral. As I say, it didn't start off that way. I don't understand that answer. Well, why did it... What way, sorry, did it start off then? And she says, they just asked what we were doing for Jodi's funeral, and I told them what we were doing. We were lighting 14 candles, and we'd be staying in the house. But instead, what happened was you invited journalists into your house. No, they asked if they could come. I didn't invite them. And you agreed with that then? Yes. And you gave them the hospitality of your living room and discussed what happened that night, all on the day of the funeral? Yes. Editor me, back to just say, when I was doing these videos I realised that each day was going to be around about 4 hours long, so what I've done is I've broke them into 2 different parts. Never fear though, both parts are going up at the same time, so if you've got this far you can jump onto part 2, or you can take a little break, come back to it later. A lot easier to watch 2 2-hour videos than what could be 1 4-hour video. I'll do the same with day 2 as well, and any other things that I think are a bit longer, but this way is a wee bit easier to edit as well. So as I say, never fear, part 2 is there. But if you had got this far, thank you very much for listening so far. What do you think? I would say, just to kind of sum up the first half of this, Corinne Mitchell wasn't able to really give a good answer as to why everyone else's statements didn't match hers. The faded green parka jacket that multiple people testified to Luke owning, and she didn't. A secret parka that he had. That, and obviously the couple of other things in terms of the burner. She chops and changes. She could have burnt some plants. She didn't use it that night, so on and so forth. Everything here is a bit hazy, and we'll go on to show some more, but just thought I'd put this here. Thank you for listening to this little video. Pop over to part 2 of day 1 and carry on. Subscribe, obviously, if this is your first video. Shane Mitchell's testimony is up as well if you want to go back and watch that. Give us a little sarcastic thumbs up, as we always say. Leave a comment in this one below about this, get a discussion going about the first half. Of course, do not be a Derek. I'll see you in the next video. But if you're jumping off here to do other things and you're coming back at a later date, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.